My business partner stole my $2.3 million company and had me banned from my own office because I refused to sign his fake bankruptcy papers. When security escorted me out like a criminal and he said, "Find yourself a new career, old man," I made one phone call that destroyed his entire world. What happened next made him lose everything he'd stolen and beg me to stop the investigation. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely. The text message arrived at exactly 9:47 a.m. on a Tuesday that started like any other day in my 25-year career building custom software solutions. Emergency board meeting. 10 a.m. sharp. David. I stared at my phone, confused. We didn't have a board meeting scheduled, and David Martinez had never called an emergency meeting in the 8 years we'd been business partners. Something in those 4 words made my coffee taste bitter. Walking into our downtown Seattle office, I immediately noticed the expensive black sedan parked in my reserved spot. Through the glass doors, I could see unfamiliar suits gathered around our conference table like vultures circling fresh prey. David met me at reception. His usual friendly smile replaced with something that looked rehearsed, almost apologetic. "Michael, thanks for coming so quickly. We have some important matters to discuss." The conference room felt different, hostile somehow, despite being the same space where David and I had celebrated every major contract win for nearly a decade. 3 men in identical gray suits sat along one side of the table, their leather briefcases positioned like weapons. "Michael," David began, his voice carrying that forced professionalism I'd heard him use with difficult clients, "I'd like you to meet our new legal advisors from Brennan, Willis & Associates." Legal advisors. Since when did we need legal advisors for a software company that had never faced a single lawsuit? The lead attorney, a thin man with predatory eyes, slid a thick manila folder across the table toward me. "Mr. Johnson, we need to discuss some serious financial irregularities that have come to light in your company's accounting." Financial irregularities. I'd personally overseen every penny that went through our books for 8 years. David leaned forward, his elbows on the table where we'd shared countless working lunches and late-night strategy sessions. "Michael, the auditors found discrepancies. Major ones. Money missing from client accounts, expenses that don't add up, revenue that disappeared." The room felt like it was tilting sideways. "David, what are you talking about? Every transaction goes through both of us. Nothing happens without dual approval." "Actually," the thin attorney interrupted, "Mr. Martinez has been conducting his own investigation for the past 6 months. The evidence is quite conclusive." "Evidence? Investigation? 6 months?" I opened the manila folder with hands that suddenly felt unsteady. Inside were bank statements I'd never seen, transaction records with forged signatures, and financial reports showing systematic embezzlement totaling $2.3 million. My own signature appeared on documents I'd never signed, authorizing transfers I'd never approved, to accounts I'd never opened. "This is impossible," I said, my voice sounding strange in my own ears. "David, you know these signatures aren't mine. You know I've never seen these accounts." David's face twisted into something I'd never seen before. Not guilt, not shame, but cold calculation finally dropping its mask. "Michael, I understand this is hard to accept, but the evidence speaks for itself." The second attorney, younger but equally predatory, pulled out a tablet showing security footage. "This video shows you entering the office at 11:30 p.m. on March 15th, well after normal business hours. I watched myself on screen, using my keycard to enter our building late at night. Except I remembered that evening perfectly. I'd come in to fix a server crash that David had called me about urgently. "You called me that night," I said slowly, pieces clicking together like ammunition sliding into a rifle chamber. "The server emergency that kept me here until 3 a.m. "I have no record of calling you," David replied smoothly. "And our IT logs show no server issues that evening." The setup was brilliant, methodical, professional. For 6 months, David had been creating false emergencies to get me into the office after hours, then using that footage to support his embezzlement frame job. The thin attorney smiled like a shark sensing blood. Mr. Johnson, we're prepared to handle this quietly. Sign these resignation papers, transfer your shares to Mr. Martinez as restitution, and we can avoid criminal charges. I stared at the documents spread across our conference table like a dealer's marked cards. Resignation papers that would make me admit to crimes I'd never committed. Share transfer forms that would give David complete control of the company we'd built together. And if I refuse, then we file criminal charges this afternoon. Embezzlement, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty. You're looking at 10 to 15 years in federal prison. David leaned back in his chair, studying me with the cold satisfaction of someone whose careful plan was working perfectly. Michael, I'm trying to help you here. Take the deal. Walk away with your freedom. Freedom. As if signing papers admitting to crimes I'd never committed could be called freedom. I looked around the conference room at the whiteboard where David and I had mapped out our company's future, at the motivational posters we'd hung together, at the photographs of successful projects we'd completed as partners. I need time to think about this. The thin attorney's smile sharpened. Time is a luxury you don't have, Mr. Johnson. We need your decision today. But I'd already made my decision. I just needed to make one phone call first. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd memorized years ago but prayed I'd never need to use. Corporate Security Investigations. This is Rebecca. David's confident expression flickered like a candle in the wind. Rebecca, this is Michael Johnson from TechFlow Solutions. I need emergency fraud investigation services. I'm sitting in a meeting where my business partner is trying to frame me for embezzlement using forged documents. The attorneys exchanged nervous glances while David's face went white as fresh snow. Sir, are you in immediate danger? Not physical danger, but they're trying to force me to sign fraudulent resignation papers right now to cover up systematic theft of company assets. Sir, investigators are en route. Please stay on the line and try to keep the suspects engaged. David lunged for my phone, but 25 years of rock climbing and marathon running had left me quicker than my 52 years suggested. I held it away from him easily. Michael, what are you doing? We're trying to help you here. Help me. You've been stealing from our company for 6 months, creating fake emergencies to build false evidence. And now you're trying to blackmail me into taking responsibility for your crimes. The younger attorney was scrambling to gather up the documents, but I'd already photographed several pages with my phone during their presentation. This is insane, David said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. You've lost your mind. We're leaving. Actually, you're not. I walked to the conference room door and opened it wide, letting the sound of approaching footsteps echo down our hallway. Through the glass walls of our office, I could see 2 investigators in dark suits entering reception, their badges visible even from 30 feet away. David froze like a deer caught in headlights, his hands full of incriminating evidence. You can't prove anything, he said, but his voice cracked like thin ice. Can't I? I pulled out my phone again and scrolled to a recording app I'd been running since entering the conference room. The evidence speaks for itself. David's own voice played back from my phone speaker. Sign these resignation papers, transfer your shares to Mr. Martinez as restitution, and we can avoid criminal charges. The lead investigator knocked on our conference room door just as my recording reached the part where David admitted to creating false evidence. Corporate Security Investigations. Agent Williams. We received a report of fraud in progress. The next 4 hours played out like a crime drama, except this was real life and the criminals were people I'd trusted with my business, my future, and my friendship. Agent Williams was a woman in her 40s with the sharp eyes of someone who'd spent her career following money trails and exposing lies. Her partner, Agent Chen, specialized in digital forensics and corporate document fraud. Mr. Johnson, walk us through what happened here today. For the next hour, I explained David's systematic theft, the forged documents, the fake emergencies designed to create false evidence, and the attempted blackmail disguised as legal advice. The attorneys tried to leave twice, but Agent Williams informed them they were material witnesses to an ongoing investigation and needed to remain available for questioning. David sat in stunned silence as Agent Chen connected his laptop to our company's servers and began pulling transaction records, email logs, and security footage that told a story David never intended anyone to see. "Mr. Martinez," Agent Williams said after reviewing the initial evidence, "you have the right to remain silent." The Miranda rights echoed through our conference room like a funeral dirge for a partnership that had died months ago when David chose greed over integrity. As they handcuffed him, David looked at me with desperate eyes. "Michael, please. This can all be worked out. We've been friends for 8 years. Friends don't steal $2.3 million from each other, David. Friends don't create elaborate schemes to destroy each other's lives." The thin attorney was trying to distance himself from the obvious fraud, claiming his firm had been deceived by false information. Agent Chen wasn't buying it. "Sir, your law firm accepted $50,000 to prepare fraudulent legal documents. That makes you an accessory to the crime, not a victim of it." By evening, all 3 attorneys were in custody along with David. The forensic accounting team had traced the stolen money through a complex network of shell companies and offshore accounts that David had spent 2 years establishing. Agent Williams called me at home that night with preliminary results that made my head spin. "Mr. Johnson, your partner wasn't planning to stop at $2.3 million. We found evidence of a scheme targeting your biggest clients next. He was building towards stealing approximately $8 million total, then disappearing to a non-extradition country. $8 million. My entire business, my clients' trust, my employees' livelihoods. All of it was going to vanish so David could fund some fantasy lifestyle in a country without extradition treaties. What happens now? Now the federal prosecutors take over. With the evidence we've gathered, David Martinez is looking at 12 to 15 years in federal prison. The attorneys will probably plea bargain for shorter sentences in exchange for cooperation. I hung up the phone and sat in my living room, looking at framed photographs of company milestone celebrations where David and I posed together like genuine partners, like friends who trusted each other completely. The house felt quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. The silence of justice beginning rather than betrayal festering. Tomorrow I would start rebuilding TechFlow Solutions without a partner who'd been secretly planning its destruction. Tonight I was just grateful that sometimes the good guys win, even when the bad guys wear familiar faces and know all your weaknesses. The Miranda rights echoed through our conference room like a funeral dirge for a partnership that had died months ago when David chose greed over integrity. As they handcuffed him, David looked at me with desperate eyes. "Michael, please. This can all be worked out. We've been friends for 8 years. Friends don't steal $2.3 million from each other, David. Friends don't create elaborate schemes to destroy each other's lives." The thin attorney was trying to distance himself from the obvious fraud, claiming his firm had been deceived by false information. Agent Chen wasn't buying it. "Sir, your law firm accepted $50,000 to prepare fraudulent legal documents. That makes you an accessory to the crime, not a victim of it." By evening, all 3 attorneys were in custody along with David. The forensic accounting team had traced the stolen money through a complex network of shell companies and offshore accounts that David had spent 2 years establishing. Agent Williams called me at home that night with preliminary results that made my head spin. "Mr. Johnson, your partner wasn't planning to stop at $2.3 million. We found evidence of a scheme targeting your biggest clients next. He was building towards stealing approximately $8 million total, then disappearing to a non-extradition country. $8 million. My entire business, my clients' trust, my employees' livelihoods. All of it was going to vanish so David could fund some fantasy lifestyle in a country without extradition treaties. What happens now? Now the federal prosecutors take over. With the evidence we've gathered, David Martinez is looking at 12 to 15 years in federal prison. The attorneys will probably plea bargain for shorter sentences in exchange for cooperation. I hung up the phone and sat in my living room, looking at framed photographs of company milestone celebrations where David and I posed together like genuine partners, like friends who trusted each other completely. The house felt quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. The silence of justice beginning rather than betrayal festering. Tomorrow I would start rebuilding TechFlow Solutions without a partner who'd been secretly planning its destruction. Tonight I was just grateful that sometimes the good guys win, even when the bad guys wear familiar faces and know all your weaknesses. The Seattle skyline glittered through my window like scattered diamonds, beautiful and distant, full of possibilities I'd almost lost to someone who'd mistaken my trust for stupidity. Justice tastes better than revenge, but both taste bitter when served at the table where friendship used to sit. 3 weeks after David's arrest, I sat in my rebuilt office interviewing potential new partners. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was looking for someone to trust after being betrayed by the person I'd trusted most. Sarah Chen walked into my office with the confident stride of someone who'd built 3 successful startups before turning 35. Her handshake was firm, her eye contact direct, but what impressed me most was her first question. "Mr. Johnson, I read about your situation in TechCrunch. Before we discuss business, I need you to know. I've been embezzled by a partner before. Lost $400,000 in my first company. So I understand what trust feels like when it's been shattered." For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was talking to someone who understood that business partnerships are built on more than just contracts and profit sharing. "Tell me about your vetting process," I said. Sarah opened her laptop and showed me a systematic background check system that would make the FBI jealous. Credit reports, criminal histories, previous business partnerships, client references, even social media analysis going back 5 years. After what happened to me, I learned that due diligence isn't paranoia. It's survival. Over the next hour, Sarah outlined her approach to business partnerships. Transparent accounting systems, dual authorization for all major transactions, quarterly external audits, and most importantly, character verification that went beyond professional credentials. "Trust isn't something you give automatically," she explained. "It's something you build gradually through verified behavior over time." By the end of our meeting, I realized I wasn't just hiring a new partner. I was learning a new way to protect myself without becoming cynical. Agent Williams called me Friday morning with news that made my coffee cup freeze halfway to my lips. "Mr. Johnson, David Martinez wasn't working alone. We've uncovered a sophisticated corporate fraud network operating across 6 states. She explained how David had connected with other corrupt business partners through online forums, sharing techniques for embezzling from trusting associates. The thin attorney from Brennan Willis and Associates had provided legal cover for at least 12 similar schemes over the past 3 years. We found detailed instructions in David's encrypted files. Step-by-step guides for identifying vulnerable business partners, creating false evidence, and executing what they called friendly fraud, stealing from people who trusted them completely. The scope was staggering. David hadn't just betrayed me personally. He'd turned betrayal into a business model. How many other victims? 17 confirmed, possibly more. Total stolen assets exceed $30 million. David's take from your company was supposed to fund his expansion into international fraud operations. That afternoon, I received a call from Marcus Webb, a restaurant owner in Portland whose partner had used identical tactics to steal his family's 3-generation business. "Michael, I saw your story on the news. The same law firm, the same fake audit story, even the same offshore account structure. They're running a franchise operation for destroying people's lives." We talked for 2 hours, comparing notes, sharing evidence, building a network of victims who refused to stay silent about systematic betrayal disguised as legal business practices. By Sunday evening, 7 other fraud victims had contacted me. Each story followed the same pattern: trusted partner, fake financial crisis, forged documents, attempted forced buyout, planned disappearance. But David and his network had made one critical mistake. They'd assumed that successful business owners would be too embarrassed or too defeated to fight back publicly. They'd underestimated the fury of people who'd built something meaningful and watched criminals try to steal it. The federal courthouse in Seattle felt like a cathedral of justice, its marble columns and vaulted ceilings designed to intimidate criminals and comfort victims. I'd worn my best navy suit, the one I'd bought for our company's 5th anniversary celebration when David and I still believed we were building something together. Judge Patricia Morrison entered with the authority of someone who'd spent 15 years sorting truth from lies in corporate fraud cases. Her silver hair was pulled back severely, her black robes crisp as fresh newspaper. "The United States versus David Martinez and Associates," she announced. "We are here for sentencing following guilty pleas entered by all defendants." Guilty pleas. David had avoided trial by confessing, probably hoping cooperation would reduce his sentence from devastating to merely life-destroying. Prosecutor James Rodriguez stood to address the court, his voice carrying the weight of evidence that had taken 8 months to compile. "Your Honor, the defendants orchestrated the largest business partnership fraud scheme in Pacific Northwest history. Over 3 years, they systematically identified and targeted successful small business owners, stealing over $30 million through elaborate deception operations." David sat at the defendant's table looking like a different person. Gone were the expensive suits and confident posture. His orange jumpsuit hung loose on shoulders that seemed to have shrunk since his arrest. When the judge asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement, I stood slowly, feeling the weight of speaking not just for myself, but for 17 other business owners whose trust had been weaponized against them. "Your Honor, I've been building businesses for 25 years. I've survived market crashes, economic recessions, and fierce competition. But nothing prepared me for the moment my business partner tried to steal everything we'd built together using my own trust as the weapon." My voice carried clearly through the courtroom, where other victims sat in the gallery, their faces reflecting the same mixture of betrayal and determination. "The money can be recovered. The business can be rebuilt. But the ability to trust future partners, to believe that handshake agreements still mean something, to know that friendship and greed don't have to be mutually exclusive, that takes much longer to repair." Judge Morrison made careful notes before addressing David directly. "Mr. Martinez, you pleaded guilty to federal charges of wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and racketeering. The evidence shows you led a criminal enterprise that destroyed lives and livelihoods for personal gain." David's lawyer stood with the desperate bearing of someone defending the indefensible. "Your Honor, my client is prepared to make full restitution and has cooperated completely with federal investigators." "Cooperation noted," Judge Morrison replied curtly. "However, the scope, sophistication, and duration of these crimes demand significant consequences. I sentence you to 15 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years supervised probation, and full restitution to all victims." 15 years. David would be 58 when he got out. His business career finished. His reputation destroyed. His elaborate network completely dismantled. As they led him away in handcuffs, David turned back to me one last time. "Michael, I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far." "David," I replied loud enough for the entire courtroom to hear, "you meant every dollar you stole and every lie you told. The only thing you're sorry about is getting caught." 6 months after the trial, TechFlow Solutions had not only recovered but grown stronger than ever. Sarah Chan and I had implemented security systems so sophisticated that embezzlement was virtually impossible. Every transaction required triple verification, every account had external monitoring, and every business decision was documented in real time. But the real transformation was personal. The $2.3 million recovery, plus additional compensation from the law firm's malpractice insurance, had given me financial security I'd never imagined. More importantly, it had taught me the difference between wealth and worth. I established the Small Business Fraud Prevention Foundation with $500,000 of the recovered money. Our mission: educating entrepreneurs about partnership risks and providing legal support for fraud victims who couldn't afford high-end investigators. The foundation's first case came from Maria Santos, a bakery owner in Phoenix whose cousin had stolen her family recipes, customer database, and business loan funds before disappearing to Mexico. "Mr. Johnson," she said during our video call, tears streaming down her face, "I saw your interview on CNN. You said that being betrayed by family doesn't mean you have to accept being destroyed by family." We provided Maria with a forensic accountant, a private investigator, and legal representation that helped her recover $180,000 and rebuild her bakery stronger than before. The second case involved Robert Kim, whose college roommate had used their 20-year friendship to gain access to his medical device company's patents, then sold them to competitors for $3 million. By year's end, our foundation had helped 23 fraud victims recover over $8 million in stolen assets, and prevented an estimated $15 million in additional fraud through our educational programs. The work was satisfying in ways that purely profitable business never had been. Every recovered dollar, every prevented crime, every rebuilt life felt like victory over the cynicism that betrayal tries to create. Sarah and I were reviewing foundation applications when she asked the question I'd been avoiding for months. "Michael, do you ever hear from David?" I showed her the stack of letters that arrived monthly from federal prison. David's handwriting, once confident and bold, now looked cramped and desperate. "He wants forgiveness," I said. "Claims he was addicted to the thrill of stealing, that he never meant to hurt me personally. That prison has changed him. Do you believe him?" I looked out my office window at the Seattle skyline, where new businesses were starting every day, built on partnerships that might succeed or might fail, but would definitely be tested by time and temptation. "I believe he's sorry he got caught. Whether he's sorry he committed the crimes, that's something only time will tell." The Business Fraud Prevention Seminar at the Seattle Convention Center drew over 300 entrepreneurs, from tech startup founders to established restaurant owners. Standing at the podium, looking out at faces eager to protect what they'd worked to build, I felt the weight of representing more than just my own experience. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to imagine coming to work tomorrow and finding that your most trusted partner has stolen everything you've worked to build, using your own trust as the weapon against you. The room fell silent except for the sound of pens moving across notebooks. This isn't a horror movie. This is what happened to me, and it's what happens to thousands of small business owners every year who believe that friendship and legally binding contracts are the same thing. For the next hour, I shared the warning signs I'd missed, the protection systems I'd failed to implement, and the investigation techniques that had saved my business and exposed a criminal network. But the most powerful part of the presentation was when I invited other fraud survivors to share their stories. Jennifer Walsh described how her restaurant partner had gradually stolen her grandmother's secret recipes and customer relationships before opening a competing restaurant using her stolen intellectual property. Tom Rodriguez explained how his construction partner had been overbilling clients and pocketing the difference for 3 years, using fake subcontractor invoices and forged inspection reports. Each story followed similar patterns: gradual trust exploitation, sophisticated evidence creation, attempted victim blame, and criminal network connections. The common thread, I explained, isn't that we were stupid or naive. It's that we operated on the assumption that business partnerships are built on mutual benefit, rather than unilateral exploitation. During the Q&A session, a young woman in the back row asked the question that everyone was thinking. "Mr. Johnson, how do you trust anyone again after being betrayed so completely?" I looked out at the room full of entrepreneurs who'd taken enormous risks to build their dreams, who depended on partners, employees, clients, and vendors to make those dreams successful. You don't trust blindly anymore. You trust intelligently. You verify everything, document everything, and remember that trust is something people earn through consistent behavior over time, not something they deserve because of history or relationship. The applause was enthusiastic, but more important were the conversations afterward. 17 business owners approached me privately to share their own concerns about partners, employees, or advisors who'd been exhibiting suspicious behavior. 2 years after David's sentencing, TechFlow Solutions had become the most trusted software development company in the Pacific Northwest. Our reputation for integrity, transparency, and fraud prevention had attracted clients who valued security over cheapest bids. Sarah and I had developed a partnership based on verified trust rather than assumed loyalty. Every major decision was documented, every financial transaction was triple verified, and every business relationship was continually evaluated for warning signs. The Small Business Fraud Prevention Foundation had grown into a national organization with offices in 12 cities. We'd helped recover over $50 million in stolen assets and prevented an estimated $200 million in fraud through our educational programs and early warning systems. But the real success was personal transformation. I'd learned that betrayal doesn't have to create cynicism if you channel the experience into protection for others. That trust, once broken, can be rebuilt more intelligently rather than more fearfully. That sometimes the worst things that happen to us prepare us to prevent worse things from happening to others. David wrote from prison monthly, his letters growing more desperate as his appeals were denied and his sentence reality set in. He claimed to have found religion, developed empathy, discovered the error of his ways through mandatory counseling programs. I never responded to his letters, but I kept them as reminders that consequences, once earned, must be fully served before forgiveness becomes relevant. The Seattle Business Journal featured our foundation in their year-end success stories, highlighting how fraud victims had created the most effective fraud prevention organization in the country. Sometimes, I told the reporter, the best revenge is making sure the criminals' methods never work on anyone else. Standing in my office that evening, looking out at the city lights where thousands of business partnerships were forming, succeeding, and sometimes failing, I realized that David's betrayal had taught me something valuable about the difference between naive trust and intelligent partnership. The photo on my desk showed Sarah and me at the Foundation's annual dinner, surrounded by fraud survivors who'd turned their worst experiences into protection for others. Real partnerships built on verified behavior rather than assumed loyalty. My phone buzzed with a text from Maria Santos, the bakery owner we'd helped in our first case. Mr. Johnson, we just opened our 5th location. Thank you for teaching me that being betrayed once doesn't mean you have to stay vulnerable forever. Outside my window, Seattle's skyline glittered with possibility and promise. Somewhere in the city, new partnerships were forming based on hope and trust. Somewhere else, criminals were planning elaborate schemes to exploit that trust. But now there was something else out there too. A network of survivors who'd learned to recognize the warning signs, protect their assets, and fight back when necessary. Justice isn't just about punishing criminals. It's about making sure their methods stop working. And in that mission, David Martinez had accidentally created his worst enemy. Someone who knew all his tricks and was dedicated to teaching them to everyone else. The Foundation's motto, printed on every business card and educational brochure, came from something Martha, Robert's wife from our original story, used to say, "Trust but verify. And if verification fails, fight back intelligently." Sometimes the best way to heal from betrayal is to make sure it never happens to anyone else. If this story has shown you the importance of protecting yourself in business relationships, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Your engagement helps us reach more people who need to hear these warning signs.